Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of Fake Accents Unite. This week, the European Age of Empires edition. I am joined by the indefatigable Britisher this evening, who has fought his way through cold and flu to get to us this evening. Good evening, sir.
Oh, why don't you just let me die now?
Because I still have use for you.
Evening, everybody.
And also joined this evening by Discordia. Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Again, been a little while since we've had you on, but a pleasure nonetheless. The people in the chat who have been waiting and moaning, like the 1 week that I am that we are on time, that would be last week. People send us messages saying, "Well, you're probably late somehow." and this week we don't get any abuse. So it's an inconsistent audience. There you go. People are saying play Yu-Gi-Oh while we wait, though. Oh, good grief! No, I don't think so. I've allowed people complaining as well that I'm allowing you to work whilst injured, Britisher. How do you feel about that?
Well, I will be speaking to my union line manager no sooner than this live stream ends.
But I am your union line manager, so I don't know how that's going to work out.
I'm quite sure my union line manager is academic agent.
Oh, God, yes. You know how much he adores being in the union, heading it up, so to speak. The people say, "You're God, Britisher, you can't be injured." Not allowed to.
Well, there is that. Albeit there is a rumour that at some point they nailed God to a cross. I don't know.
Oh, what is it? It's not that you're ill, it's merely that you're weeping for all mankind. Is that right?
There is that. Yes, of course. There is that.
Did you get any statutory sick pay? That's what you need.
Particularly given the goings on Twitter recently. Yes, I do indeed weep for mankind.
Undoomed says you need some whiskey in you.
Yes. I already had the exchange with Undoomed regarding whether one writes whiskey with an E or without.
And what was your conclusion, or was it just a fight to the death?
Well, no Scotsman would ever speak to me again if I ever wrote whiskey with an E.
Mm-hmm.
You see, whiskey with an E is either Irish or American.
This is why Discordia is refusing to speak to you. Of course, you chose the wrong side, didn't you?
Exactly. British or who?
British or who? No. So this week has been kind of, I want to say uneventful, but it hasn't really been. It's just been a lot of quite dull politics, insofar as I'm aware. Apart from one big thing, which was, of course, Guy Verhofstadt came across to the Liberal Democrat conference, didn't he? And
that was unbelievable.
And decided to say the time of nation states is gone, and the time of empires is at hand, and there's nothing that we can do about it apart from unionize under the rule of Brussels. There was a separate interview which I think is from considerably further back, where let me just yes, in the streaming channel. Sorry, Undoomed wants to join us. There we are. So he another speech that he gave where he simply said that he outlined his plan for the European Union, basically, where he said that he wanted to streamline the whole process. He says at the moment you've got all these nations, because we're an affiliation, we're not an empire, we're just empire-sized, and if one nation vetoes things, then nothing happens, and he hates the fact that it's all bureaucratic, basically stalemates at every decision. So what he wants to do is change the game, as it were, and have members and affiliated states. So those who want to be members can be members, and those who can be affiliated states can be affiliated states. But the difference will be that members will lose the right to, they'll lose their sovereignty and control. They won't have any vetoes. They won't have anything. Basically, they become subject to the EU, and it becomes an empire. But I thought, without as insane as the entire idea is, I understand his motivations. He is someone who is one part, I think I described it on Twitter as 2 parts vision of the anointed, 1 part fear. So he fears America, he fears China, India, and the other rising powers, and he fears what the third world could become. And he wants to be able to compete with that, and the way he sees to compete with it is not to have a strong union in terms, just a strong defensive union with something like, European Union, NATO, that sort of thing. But no, you need to have the actual empire of the European Union needs to happen so that we can be of one voice when dealing with these enormous neighbours and that sort of thing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yes, yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's, to be honest, I think what it is with Mr. Verhofstadt, or should we just call him Augustus, is that in reality he's trying to talk of, the future being one of big trade blocks. But somehow he got it into his mind that, with the British being the British, he has to address us in a way that we would understand. So therefore he starts talking to us about empires.
I find it funny because, of course, the rhetoric for the last 100 years or so, 100, more like 50, 60, has been empire bad.
Yes,
it's always been bad. The idea of Hitler was trying to create an empire. The British Empire committed atrocities. The French and the Spanish empires, or the colonies, created huge issues. Colonialism bad. Also, now we want an empire again, but obviously one by consent, an empire by consent. But it's kind of one of those things where,
well, wasn't it Gorbachev who said that what he finds it even more astounding that in a way the collapse of the Soviet Union is that to the west of the very same territory, the European Union seems to be seeking to recreate it.
Yeah. But the thing that I see with it is because I was getting into a vigorous discussion. Let's call it a vigorous discussion. I just need to make sure.
Surely you never have vigorous discussions with anybody.
Oh, you know me.
Oh, yes, I do.
a vigorous discussion. I think it was with Ray and a couple of her supporting staff, and basically they were talking about how everyone knew what they were doing when they signed up to the European Union, and I'm going, well, actually the European Union as it stands today was nothing like what it was at the beginning. For a start, it was just supposed to be the EEC, wasn't it? And it was the European Community, then it was the European Economic Community. Is that right? And then
the problem was that in this particular case the prospectus changed over time. And therefore a great many people feel that what they originally voted for is no longer what is reflected within it as it stands now.
Yeah, the European Union has become as bloated. I think that's the term. It's outgrown what it was initially intended for, and now obviously the directives flowing down are influence. Like, there's a lot of people saying that just us joining in the first place is now rendered illegal, which it wasn't at the time, but it was illegal for us to continue to be a part of it, I suppose, and allow it to become what it is today, without saying, actually, you have no right to anything that we've, you cannot direct us to do this. And they get around it in a funny way, because obviously a directive isn't legally binding. It's just sort of we were going to aim towards doing this.
Yes, it is strange, though, how governments appear to be entitled to agree all manner of things with the European Union until it's the government seeking to make any decisions which possibly could take it out of the sphere of the European Union.
Yeah,
it's strange how that works with the courts and the understanding of legality, isn't it?
I've been receiving conflicting information on the Lisbon Treaty recently. Not sure like some people have been saying it doesn't even exist, which I think is
something tells me it must exist.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what is the Lisbon Treaty we're talking about? Yes.
Well, it's not even. It's sort of an amendment to treaties as well. It's not even a proper treaty. It's known as an international agreement, officially. Which is supposed to. Here we have the.
Is this the one that became the after runner of the Constitution?
Yes, this is the one from 2000.
So that's why it's not an agreement. What was it? It's not a treaty. It's an agreement.
Yes, I know.
It's not a constitution. It's not a treaty, but it's an agreement.
So yes. Exactly. But this is the one from 2007 that came into force in 2009, I think. And basically declares that a series of different things is going to happen post 2022, I think it is. So one of the things it wants to do is basically remove things like the ability of nation states to veto, avoiding the Eurozone. So,
yeah.
And also to avoid, being in Schengen and stuff like that. So, it's moving further and further and further towards, and
it's what Mr. Blair would say. Oh, these are not really new laws. This is merely a streamlining of the existing framework.
Well, this is the other thing, because of course the Constitution was rejected almost unanimously, because obviously it included things like an EU national anthem and an EU national flag and these sorts of things which people didn't want. And funnily enough, you'll notice that there is an EU anthem and there is an EU flag at the moment. And the reason this is because the Lisbon Treaty has additional... I can't remember what they're called.
It's because the leotard makers of the world needed a new market to sell their goods to. So therefore, people could express their desire to stay within the EU outside the British Houses of Parliament by the means of creative dance.
Obviously.
That must be it, yeah.
Yeah.
You're onto something there, British.
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen the how shall we say, the increasingly excessive layers of ludicrousness when it comes to those demonstrations.
Yeah, they're getting out of hand, shall we say?
Yeah.
People saying Saffron in chat say the EU anthem is retarded. It's just.
Well, no, actually, it's a very, very nice composition. It was just never meant for a nation.
It was stolen, wasn't it? It's
Ode to Joy.
Ode to Joy, yeah. But they have words to it as well.
Ja, Freude schöner Götterfunke, Tochter aus Elysium. Yeah, it's a beautiful piece. What it has to do with Europe is beyond me. It literally is describing joy.
Yeah.
So yes, in fluent German. Yes. What can I say?
All I remember is the first time I heard it properly was when the Brexit Party MEPs turned their back on it when it was when it was done, and I felt sorry for the kids because they were basically children who were playing it. It
is funny because the second line in that is "Wir betreten feuertrunken Heilige den Eigentum," which basically sort of I can't translate it directly, if you know what I mean, but it kind of sort of means we enter into your, holiest of holies.
Yes.
Which is kind of interesting that they actually would be in, while that is playing, they would be in the European Parliament and would turn their backs on it. So it would literally be the opposite of what the song is describing.
Yes. I'm trying to find a decent version of the lyrics translated, but they are not. Nowhere seems to have it. There's plenty of audio recordings of it, but I can't be bothered with that, Let me see. Undoomed is trying to join us. His mic isn't registering though, so he'll try and fix that. But yeah, that's all. Let's go through some super chats then. Portrait Seal says 20-year-old Britisher was the first both to contract and spread the plague.
Yes, it must have been me. I can't really imagine who else it would have been.
I
was actually the degenerate who brought about the fall of the Roman Empire.
I always knew that you were a rodent at heart.
Yes, yeah, because for those people still convinced that it was all easy living and too many orgies and whatever. Plagues played a major part in the fall of the Roman Empire.
I always knew you were a rodent at heart, Britisher. That's all I can say.
Very much so, yes. If you think rat, think me, yes.
So the Architect of Fate says, "Good evening, Mr. Britisher. Can I get a reaction to the leggings that have been created in your honour? Perhaps PJW would enjoy a pair of them sent to him."
Leggings have been created in my honour. What is it that I don't know about?
They were amazing.
Let me see if I can find.
Would this by any chance have anything to do with twerking?
No.
No.
Although
I'm just, not that I have any idea why that springs to mind. I'm just loosely recalling the last 48 hours on Twitter.
Let me see if I can.
I may have to get myself a pair of Britisher leggings.
So, Britisher, you can find these leggings in Stream Chat. I will just post a link to them there.
As though I knew where Stream Chat is.
It's just above the streaming channel, man. It's just one click away. So there are these.
Yes, I have seen those. Yes, I stand corrected. Yes, which more than likely would actually look all the more interesting in whilst the twerk was in operation.
All I've got going through my head is British in red is dancing with me, cheek to cheek.
Dear God.
And full clap at that point.
Hey, how you doing?
Good evening, Undoomed. Can you hear us perfectly well? I hope
yes,
so.
I can hear you. And
thank God you've arrived, if only to stop Not So Obvious from singing anymore.
I thought that was my cue.
Naturally. I apologise for, subjecting you to that.
What was the Irish fella called who actually sung that song?
Oh, yeah, I don't remember that.
That was that is... Yeah, Christerberg.
Christerberg, yes, indeed. Yes. Yeah, he was very successful. That's the looking back, that's the frightening bit about it. Yes.
The how's things across the pond, Undoomed?
Well, same old, just craziness. How about you?
It's up and down. I'm enjoying being back in London, so that's where I'm just getting used to everything again. Explosive.
By now, I think it's more than likely a question of where the civil war breaks out first, on your side or on our side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, that is.
I mean, the unfortunate bit about it, of course, is that you lot are armed to the teeth, whereas we will be going at each other with sharpened shards of broken teacups.
It would be sharpened spoons, but they've taken those as well.
What about sporks?
As if such a travesty would exist on this side of the pond.
Oh, well, sporks are more than likely made on the continent and will be impossible to obtain once Brexit happens.
And if they do come across, they'll all be infected with super gonorrhea because the Europeans refuse to sterilise them for us.
Or they're just doing that biological warfare thing.
Yeah, they
so
want.
I am their first victim. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, instead of tainted towels or whatever they used with the Indians.
Oh, instead of the Tsar's towels. All they need to do is poison the wine supply, and when they send it across to us, and that's all it takes.
Do you drink wine?
The British love both French and Spanish wine. So
I believe we are actually the largest market for champagne.
As well.
I thought you were beer guys.
I mean, we have a binge drinking culture, Undoomed. We'll drink pretty much anything, especially the Scots.
The British have quite an intake when it comes to alcohol.
Right.
So it's a quite international intake. Let's put it like that.
Anything with a
Pretty
BAC
much,
on it.
yes.
What's the
So
BAC? Okay.
So when
That's
it
good enough.
comes to things like champagne and wine, it's things like that one has been trying to point out to the European Union and the French in particular, that one might be shooting oneself in the foot if one doesn't want a trade agreement with Britain.
Indeed. You speak about us not having weapons, Britisher, but I mean, speak for yourself. Some of us were raised in the country,
So you'll be walking around with shotguns, will you? Telling everybody to get off your land.
Indeed. It'll be a cultured shotgun, over under sort of style thing, and my sword cane and cape, of course.
Right.
Oh, of course. Well, no, the cape. I think you have to drop the cape. That would make you look too much like someone else.
I want to hear your "Get Off My Lawn" impersonation.
Get off my lawn. No. Oh god. Explosive X estimated €5.49 and says Guy must first conquer Gaul before he can move. Or Guy must first conquer Gaul before he can move on, declaring himself dictator for life. There's that.
Yes, it was. I also pointed out on Twitter that it was interesting that Guy Verhofstadt, of course, is Belgian, and here he is talking of empires. And when it comes to the history of empires, the Belgian Empire is possibly one of the worst in all times.
Well, yes.
So it's rather interesting.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's it.
It's rather interesting that a Belgian should be starting to talk about empires on the continent of Europe.
Inferiority complex.
Especially a Belgian who looks somewhat like Mike Myers as a
fat Hitler.
I was going to say as Austin Powers. Like if you mixed Austin Powers with Elton John in later life, I think that's roughly.
I think he's got the hand movements down, no?
Except he's playing an invisible piano as opposed to Elton John's real one.
Yes.
No. I mean the Hitler moves with his throwing his fist around.
The histrionic hand movements, just throw them anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess did you go over that thing? What was it? He was at the Lib Dems.
Yeah. So speaking of that conference as well, he was met by thunderous applause after his discussion of empire. And
given that this is, of course, one of the most charismatic and just generally popular men that you could possibly ever think of.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
But I think
he basically said that the European Union will be reorganized into the first galactic empire.
Into the first galactic empire. Yes, I can see it so much.
Did he, by any chance, announce that they will be starting the construction of a Death Star at any time?
I believe it's a star of death in the European linguistic tradition.
L'Étoile du Mort or something like that, is it?
Gotta get the French name for it.
I'm trying to see if I can find the exact thing. I think I may have just liked it instead of retweeting it. But there's something about Joe Swinson's policy, which was just flat out. We're going to stop Brexit. We're going to, in her usual way, we're going to...
Joe Swinson effectively announced that... she announced she's got the conference to back it, so now it's officially Lib Dem policy.
Yeah.
So they are now saying that were they to come to power, which we know is not really realistic, but given the way things happen, they may not win the election, but they could be a coalition partner.
Mm-hmm.
Were they to come to power, they would be advocating for the revocation of Article 50 outright.
Yeah.
So not a second referendum, not, No, we will just get rid of Brexit. We will pretend
the vote never happened.
That occurred 3.5 years ago never happened.
I saw your talking head guy there rip her new asshole. What's his name?
Farage.
Yeah, it's like some sort of Good Morning Britain or some shit. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I think I saw this. Let me Let me see what I can find.
I don't know what kind of show it was. It was just floating around on Twitter.
Joe Swinson wrecked. That will probably do it.
It's something remarkable, isn't it? That you basically have Parliament grant the right for a referendum.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, this idea that, it was only the Tory party and whatever. No, it was actually an act of Parliament that set up the referendum.
Mm.
Right.
So when he's always talking about the fact that this was just internal, Tory party politics, yada, yada, yada. No, Parliament set this up. The people expressed their will, and apparently it was the wrong result. And now we actually have the first party come out advocating to simply cancel the result.
It's the trouble with it's the idea of losers' consent. If you vote on something, it doesn't matter what the result is, you agree to abide by it. And of course, this has all been muddied by the fact that they will flat out tell you that they believe that the referendum itself was illegal, so it shouldn't count, or there was too much misinformation in the referendum. You get this idea that they'll say, it should be cancelled because Leavers were lied to, and we feel sorry for them. You get the Leavers who say the Remainers were lied to, especially in the wake of these Guy Verhofstadt comments. But they don't care. They want things to go through.
Put it like this: when it comes to lies, I am fully willing to accept that the Leave camp told some porkies, and exaggerated some things. Yeah. I'm fully willing to accept that because that's what politicians do. Mm-hmm. But correct me if I'm wrong. Did or did not the Remain camp say that voting, so basically not the actual act of leaving the European Union, merely the act of voting to leave the European Union, would upset the economy so badly that it would be necessary to issue an emergency budget?
Yeah, the current head of the Bank of England as well issued a statement saying that he thought that that we would see an immediate 5% drop, which could be up to 18%, over the course of 6 months post-Brexit vote.
Did you guys see that that guy on Twitter? He made a really long, helpful series of tweets where he had compiled all the, that girl from Lib Dem, what's her name again?
Joe Swinson.
Joe Swinson, and all these other people from Labour and all that shit, and they were all in Parliament saying that yes, we should have a fucking referendum, and the European Union is weird and ineffectual and blah blah blah. And I guess back then they were really just certain that it would go their way or something.
At the time of the referendum, the Remainers were so smug. They're still pretty smug now, and I should know, I was one. But it was all considered to be predetermined, which is another thing which the Remainers are salty about, because they feel like a large percentage of the population that didn't vote must all be on their side, but thought it was a done deal, so didn't bother.
Well, I think you must be familiar with that concept, mustn't you, Undoomed, regarding what happened in the presidential elections in America?
Sure.
Because there too, there was a camp that had convinced itself that it was going to win quite easily.
Yeah,
and then really, woke up the next day and it wasn't the case.
It's easy to draw parallels there for sure.
And in a way,
bad fucking losers, man.
Yes, in a way, both sides, both the losing camps in this regard, have reacted in the same way. That they have simply refused to accept the result.
Year after year after year.
Sora Sapiens. Go on.
No, I was just. When was the referendum? Was that also 2016?
Yeah, June.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much same time frame as well.
This is why there are a series of really terrible memes calling 2016 the worst year to have happened since 1939. That sort of thing. 2016 was the worst. Loads of celebrities died. Also, Trump got in, and we had the Brexit referendum. So It was, yeah. I think I made a joke of it when in my video.
I would go as far as saying, I mean, given what we've seen, since 2016, whatever, I would go as far as saying 2016 was when there was a revolt against the consensus.
Yes.
Yeah.
That basically the established politics that all parties kind of politely politely agreed.
You just cut out for a second there, Britisher. You come back for us. Can anyone else hear me? Is this just my side? Unable to connect to chat. Well, that's not ideal.
Obvious, as opposed to his preferred name, which is Ivan.
Right.
Okay.
Reset my Discord.
You see, it's very elegant the way he's just completely ignoring that particular comment.
I'm just trying to get the stream back on, man. Like, I'm hoping people can hear us.
You see, his avatar has got quite a strong manly beard.
Oh, shush.
And I therefore like to refer to him as Ivan Rebrov, who was a famous Russian folk singer, who was also famous for sporting an enormous beard.
Okay. I'm not up to date with Russian folk singers, I gotta admit.
Well, I'll let you off on that one.
Thankfully, the stream appears to have reconnected, so people can hear what we're saying again. God, thank God. Right, it appears.
Did you reboot or something? Or?
Yeah, I had to. Like, my entire internet freaked out. Everything was lagging. I had to close a load of stuff down, and hopefully do it. We can hear you all.
That's a long way of saying I'm a boomer.
It's not my fault anyway. If there is an echo, please let me know so that I can.
Well, we've got people saying echo, echo, echo.
Well, there's one person saying echo.
What was your
echo,
first
echo.
clue?
Right. What were we talking about before that whole debacle? Let me see. What were we talking about?
I think we've gone past Mr. Guy Verhofstadt, hadn't we?
Right. I'll tell you what. I will crack on with the super chats, and we will see where things go. And yes, I can see Harry Channel saying, "Please check Streamlabs." It is on my list, my man. Let me see. I nearly called him my boy. Then it's like my boy. So yes, Streamlabs is working. Here we go. Let's go with that. And in just a second, voila. So, Harry Channel says a 20-year-old Britisher was the first person to write 58008 on an abacus.
Yes, yeah, that was more than likely me. Yes.
I suspect the Britisher was the first person to use an abacus.
In fact, he was the first person to develop.
I was also the first person to take Samuel Johnson's dictionary and just look up all the dirty words.
Well, I offer you my greatest contrafibularities for that story, Britisher. But yes, apologies, Harry. Obviously, that came through ages ago. I should have got to that one first, but don't worry, it's up now. Let me see. Right, Sora Sapien says, this week's cigar stream will be fun. A Q&A with the mother of untruth. Just like the dark days. It will be like an old Ray's Roundtable XD. This is absolute ear cancer. Please stop the echo. Like the dark days.
Dominic is now also saying, "Please stop the echo."
I can't hear any echo on my version, so I apologise. Portrait Seal says body pillows when? Body pillows. Can you imagine? If you're a British a body pillow, anyone? Yeah, people saying no echo. So clearly Dominic's messing with us, or it's something on his end. There we go.
Well, he's more than likely drunk again. There's more than likely some key word on which he had to drink again every time when we said it.
It was probably Guy Verhofstadt, wasn't it?
It could well be. By the way, I think I've remembered, weren't we on the Lib Dems cancelling Brexit? And I think you wanted to look something up, and then everything went haywire.
Oh, good grief! Yes, Jo Swinson was saying she wanted to cancel it all outright. Other people are hearing echo, but some people don't. I don't know what to say. Everything coming out my end is not echoing. There are only 2 audio channels going out, so perhaps refresh the stream, see if it works.
What do you mean you got 2 audio channels?
So one audio channel is from my mic input, and the other audio channel is audio output. So when you guys speak, it then gets transmitted.
Okay.
Simple as.
Gotcha.
That's all it is. Lots of people saying sounds fine to me. Good. Right. Yes, Jo Swinson saying, yeah, we want to walk back the vote in its entirety. We want to revoke Article 50 and never ever invoke it ever again. I don't know whether or not that's going to be a successful policy, but I am worried that Boris is going to split the Leave vote between himself and the Brexit Party, and that will provide a sideline for the Liberal Democrats to come in and ruin everything. Do you know what I mean?
Right, but do you think there'll be an election before the 31st?
They're denying it at the moment, so I don't think there's that. What I think will happen is they will get their extension until January, and then things will continue to go round and round in fruitless circles until then, and then they will seek a 2-year extension.
That is one of the tricky areas. You see, the law that was passed doesn't just say that the Prime Minister needs to ask for an extension until the end of January.
He has to accept any extension offer, doesn't he?
He basically has to ask for an extension until the end of January, but it is then upon the EU to offer any longer extension should they want to.
Yeah.
And he would be required by law to accept any such extension.
And they will know
and
this
the only body that would be entitled to, within, I think, 48 hours or whatever, reject it would be Parliament. And we all know what they think.
Yeah.
Right.
I think I think they're going to go for 2 years. That's what the French ambassador is saying.
Well, that's sort of the worry, that they suddenly are given the ability to basically kick this down the road 2 or 3 years.
But why can't he just sit on his hands till the 31st?
Well, because they have now basically made an act of Parliament that makes it British law that he must go and ask for an extension. So if he sits on his hands, he breaks the law.
And he goes to prison.
Yeah.
Did they specify the incarceration time?
Well, we literally have had... what was Dominic Grieve? What was his position? Is it Attorney General? We've literally had a former Attorney General, and I mean, he's got a bee in his bonnet, Dominic Grieve, and he has been on television literally saying if he breaks the law, he'll go to prison.
Yeah.
So we've pretty much now got the political establishment threatening the Prime Minister who is trying to take Britain out of the EU with incarceration.
You couldn't make it up, could you?
Precisely.
Yeah, this doesn't make any sense. What about your Supreme Court?
Well, that's what it comes down to now on Tuesday, because of course there have been several legal challenges on whether Boris Johnson is even permitted to suspend Parliament. And that now goes to the Supreme Court. It will be very interesting to see how that plays out in the Supreme Court, because that might give us an indication of what might happen in other legal challenges when it comes to this issue.
Right, but can't he challenge that law?
I don't think he would have any. I don't think he would have any grounds by which to challenge an act of Parliament.
Isn't that like a capricious law or something, just targeting one person?
Well, I mean, they did.
It's targeting the office, so it's not the person specifically, Boris.
Okay. Loopholes.
Well, you see, what we simply have is we have the expressed public will wanting one thing, but we have the public's representatives wanting the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And these two things are now in direct conflict. So this is the same thing as if in America you would hold a referendum and Congress wouldn't agree.
Right.
And that's why you've now got this toxic mix whereby both these things claim to be democratic. And both are in absolute opposition to each other. As I say, what I like to point out it is that it was Parliament that actually sanctioned the referendum.
Right.
So it's very difficult, as far as I'm concerned, for them to morally distance themselves, as they are now trying to do, from something that they actually put into place, which was the referendum.
Right. So what does British law say about referendums? Are they guiding or binding?
This is a guiding referendum. Yes, you can't, but this is largely due to the fact that you can't have anything in British law that supersedes the sovereignty of Parliament. So as such, it is merely guiding, and therefore it doesn't force Parliament's hand. Mm-hmm. But given that Parliament effectively passed it on to the people precisely because they didn't want to take the decision,
right?
It was then given to the people, so it clearly has the authority of the electorate. That is the very thing upon which each parliamentarian bases his mandate. So, as such, the moral force is clearly behind the referendum. That there's no going. I mean, I am speaking as someone who voted Remain, but I was just appalled from day one when I saw how the Remainers reacted. Right. Because I'm sorry, if you hold a vote, and that's it. The idea that you can then just say, oh well, no, it's not the right outcome. That's ludicrous, because in that case, your commitment to democracy is wafer thin. And as far and I must say, I mean, what we have seen by the European Union has not been something that would endear anybody any further to the European Union. You don't
want the Galactic Empire, huh?
Well, I mean, it has been absolutely remarkable to observe. It has been kind of sort of motivated by spite is the only way one can, because this is against the interest of all parties at hand. I mean, the Germans are liable to lose tens of thousands of jobs in the German car industry if they lose access to the British car market.
Mm-hmm.
But why would this be in the German interest? Do you understand what I mean? Even to have simply an agreement with the British on motor vehicles, No, we're not doing anything. You have to pay us 39 billion quid. And you just look at this and you just go, they seem to be out of their mind. Now, as it happened, they had perhaps just about the most incompetent British Prime Minister ever with whom to negotiate,
right,
which was Theresa May. I mean, it was just unbelievable to watch.
In fact, some new information has come to light regarding her term as well, which is that the EU has obviously had quite a bad year. The nations in it have had quite a bad year when it comes to the economies in the Union. And so several countries have had to drop their contribution, Now, the UK suffered the least because, despite Brexit, our economy is actually performing rather well, and comparatively, and actually our contribution to the EU budget has gone up by something in the region of 20% this year, since 2016 even. So we've given an additional, I think it's £3 billion or something, over the course.
Well, last I heard, we contribute something like 12%.
Yeah.
To the European Union coffers.
According to AFD spokeswoman, I can't remember her name, we are the equivalent of the bottom 15 countries' economies combined. Yeah. So
that was. I remember seeing that.
So you say 12%?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in population, how much are you?
We are. I don't know actually, off the top of my head.
I think we would be considerably less than that.
What is the population of Europe?
I have no idea.
It is 700. We're about 10% of the population of Europe.
Okay.
Yeah. Just under, really. Perhaps 8%, 8 or 9%.
So yes, you've got the Germans, the French, and the British. We by now are the two. We're the three biggest contributors. So obviously, they don't want us to drop out because we all know that Bulgaria are not going to suddenly start contributing to the EU. So everybody knows that the gap will have to be filled by the most prodigious contributors at the moment. So yes, I think sort of countries like Holland and Finland, and in particular, aren't particularly looking forward to it because, given their small sizes, they actually contribute quite a bit, I believe.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, it seems harder to get out of that shit than the mafia.
Well, the trouble is that France and Germany, in particular, as much as their kind of, let's call it their cultural distaste for Britain, they are quite dependent on us economically anyway, not just in terms of obviously our exports and imports, but also tourism and that sort of thing, because go on.
The Germans are also politically very dependent on us. You see, when it comes to countries like France, they're quite left-leaning. The Germans are quite conservative. And it is they who are actually always trying to get the others to be quite, responsible with their budgets and whatever. Yeah. Particularly, obviously, given that they're in the euro and whatnot. And therefore, they have always regarded the British as a strong ally. Because when it comes to kind of voting down fairly left-wing legislation in the European Union, Britain has always been on side with the Germans. Right. And the Germans and the British being two of the biggest paymasters, and at the same time having quite a lot of clout just due to their size in the European Parliament, you don't need to find many other allies in order to be able to block something. So if Britain leaves, then Germany will at one moment find itself to be the very dominant power, but it will also find itself to be the one conservative power that might be completely outvoted by the much more left-leaning powers of Italy, Spain, France.
Yes, that's right.
It will also have to negotiate with fucking 15 different countries instead of 3.
I remember there was talk because the Greece caused huge issues because all the Mediterranean states periodically vote for increased access to EU budgets, and every single time they've done that, Britain has been there on side to vote down that proposal, which is something Germany can no longer rely on as soon as we actually leave. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
The just there's so many consequences, and you just think there's so many different ways this could have been done reasonably, and why has it not been done reasonably? It is infuriating. Anyway, so JS has donated £2. No, Siskoen has donated 50 kroner and says 5 minutes and 9 seconds late. And the EU are a bunch of treacherous, contract-violating, bacon haters and Hitler-agreeing anti-smokers. Also burn Brussels. So thank you for that contribution, Siskoen. JS donated £2, says, thoughts on Saudi Arabia? Will there be a war? Oh, yes, because there have been some attacks, haven't there? Sort of in the last 2 days?
Right.
The US
war against whom?
The US has accused Iran of attacking Saudi oil facilities. So Iran denies involvement in Saturday's air attacks, which were claimed by Iran-aligned rebels in Yemen.
Oh my God, we're going to get more CIA bullshit now, aren't we?
Oh, yes.
But you see, I mean, it's the Houthis in Yemen who claim to have been the ones attacking.
Yeah.
One of the problems there is that it would be hundreds of kilometers from the Yemeni border to the actual refineries that have been attacked. And people are wondering, are the Saudis really that inept, which they might well be, because they have proved themselves to be utterly incompetent in the Yemeni war? Or was this actually somehow launched from within Saudi Arabia itself? And then you have to ask yourself, would the Yemenis really be capable of doing something like that? Or would it be Saudi Arabia's main regional opponent?
I don't know enough about, obviously I know that a little bit of the history of the Gulf War, but I'm not too familiar with Saudi Arabia outside of that. What has been interesting to see is that in one day, the price of oil went up 20%. And then it's dropped down since. But
here's the thing: why wouldn't they, or why couldn't they just fucking fight that war by themselves? They have the third biggest military budget in the world.
Because they're completely and utterly incompetent.
Well, they have enough tech, so they could.
Well, that's just it. The tech in the world, the best tech in the world, means nothing. What's he called? Simon Whistler. He does some wonderful sort of pieces. What is it? Visual Politic. It's called a channel. And in there, there's one video once in which he kind of tries to explain, how is it possible that this minnow that is Yemen, one of the poorest countries in the world, with which no tech whatsoever and very few people, and pretty much like the Afghans, men with mules and Kalashnikovs, cannot be beaten by Saudi Arabia that is going at them with all the tech in the world. And he kind of tries to explain that Arab armies have a major weakness, and that is that the authorities never trust them due to there always being coups in the Middle East or whatever for the past 50 to 100 years. So therefore, everything is under central control. So if you are, say, in the US Army and you get caught up in an ambush, your officers will be expected to independently decide, what do we do? Do we just basically pull out and run, or do we take countermeasures against whoever is attacking us? What do we do?
Right.
Whereas there, it is then expected that they get in touch with headquarters. And by the time that has gone all the way up the chain of command and all the way down the chain of command again, the situation may already have changed. Everybody may already be dead.
My only real experience with a mixture of the UAE, Kuwaiti Air Force, and Oman, of all places, was that the majority of their officer cadre are actually the sons of their equivalent gentry, right? So they still have the kind of the divine right of kings, right? So this idea that you are born into the right family, therefore you are of officer stock, therefore you will go to be an officer, and there's really no sense of competency in terms of their selection process. Some of them are competent, some of them are good guys, a lot of them are just rich kids who are there because their parents told them they had to do 3 years or 2 years in the military. And so
if you think of it, what will it take to be able to fly an F-15 in America? I mean, how much of a selection process will you need to go through in order to become such a pilot?
Yeah, probably.
Whereas in Saudi Arabia, if you're related to the royal family or some very powerful family closely associated with said royal family,
and you've bought your commission,
chances are your chances are much better.
Yeah, here you go. Here's your F-16.
But it basically, what do you then expect? How much can you then expect from such a pilot?
I get it. It's they're probably not going to be able to do it then, huh?
I mean, I remember there was some time ago there was a situation where the Americans fired some missiles into Yemen. And there was all sorts of shenanigans, claims and counterclaims or whatever, but sort of on the grapevine, some of the press basically implied that the Saudis had tried to hit a target again and again and again and again and not managed it. So eventually the Americans with a destroyer off the coast just took it out for them. So the Saudis were creating that much collateral damage trying to hit something and just basically hitting everything around it, but never the actual thing, then eventually the Americans took it out for them. Whether that is actually true, who knows? But I think the claim that the American destroyers came under missile fire from Yemen can be discounted. The idea that Yemen, one of the poorest countries in the world, would have suddenly decided out of the blue to take on the world's superpower, I think can be discounted. The Americans must have had a different reason to fire those missiles.
Right.
And therefore, it is quite credible. The fact that these guys with all the tech in the world were trying to bomb something and just simply couldn't hit it. And eventually the Americans just pressed a button.
Yeah.
And I mean, always imagine just how useful this is to the Americans. How much actual hardware the Saudis must be going through and must constantly be needing new bombs and new spare parts.
But of course, they keep losing it as well, don't they? Shall we say?
Probably, yeah. Shall we say?
That's the correct, the polite way of saying that they can't protect their convoys, and also they might be supplying rebel groups. But
yeah, they probably have some corruption there, selling some shit off the side from the army base there, fell off the back of a truck and
So that's Saudi Arabia. Architect of Fate says the Britisher did not cut out. Someone bought a pair of his leggings. Now he's busy with a young lady sitting on his face.
Oh.
Well, it's a thought.
Yeah, well, clearly.
A thought?
A thought.
It's a thought.
Chemical.
Congratulations just on the speed of that thought. Yes.
The speed of that thought. Chemical Ollie says, watch David Starkey's interview on Spiked. I think he explains that the people are sovereign, not the Parliament. Parliament has mandate from the sovereignty of the people. That's
I think he also uses the word treason there, doesn't he?
I haven't seen that particular interview, so
But if it's the one I'm thinking of, I might be thinking of the wrong one, but yet he does use the word treason when he points out that there has been situations where it appears, high-ranking British politicians from the Parliament, or in some cases perhaps even, Tory grandees and whatever, have been speaking to the EU, effectively negotiating against the negotiations that the UK government has been undertaking.
Yeah. Well, there's always reports of, he was still there. Lovely.
Well, I can hear you.
Yeah, it's not going to be an issue with it's not going to be an issue with Discord. It's going to be an issue with connecting to the streaming on YouTube. What was I saying? Before I said that, what on earth?
I think you were saying that there has been various reports.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But they're always unsubstantiated because, of course, the only people who could substantiate these kind of things are the people who are actually there.
Yeah. So there's
and
always
they're
reports.
not really going to tell us, are they?
There's always reports of talking to so and so a person or this, that, and the other, and that an unnamed EU official has said, that. Actually, yeah, we're going to give you this length of extension, and yes, and we can give you this, that, and the other, and wouldn't we bump this salary up? Anyway.
Well, yes, but I think it was confirmed effectively that that members of Parliament did approach a high-ranking EU official prior to basically putting through the law forcing Boris Johnson to have to ask for an extension. They did actually contact the EU to ask
checked
whether the EU would accept such a request for extension.
Yeah.
So clearly there did seem to be some backroom negotiations between members of Parliament and the EU in order to try and maneuver the UK government into a position where they're forced to do something.
How frequent are the European elections again? Remind me.
Pass. I would have assumed 4 years, but I don't. Could be 5.
Let me EU election. Let's see. Every 5 years, yeah. So I think it's likely in the event of Boris offering an extension that they will offer to extend until the end of the European Parliamentary session, because
Possibly, yeah.
Because they go, you can work it out by then, because that's just the natural end of the term of the people you've already elected to us already. I mean, doesn't it work out lovely? Wouldn't surprise me. William Southworth.
It does keep them with Nigel for another 4.5 years, which
I mean,
they may not want.
I mean, they've been stuck with Nigel since the 90s, if not before.
I think the thing to point out is that it is possible short term for parliamentary politicians or whatever to kind of come up with these things, and for the EU to also sort of be in connivance with it. But sooner or later, electorally, there is going to be a reckoning.
Yeah.
Because you cannot do this and hope for the population to just basically take it lying down.
Yeah, I see. Right. Colin P. Smith saying we should send in Farage to contact the anti-EU resistance and bring back the SOE. So...
Well, I think there is something that I pointed out early on after Brexit. I sort of made a video about it in which I kind of explained the EU are not in a stronger position as we're always told they are, because of course it looks as if they are this massive bloc and we are only one country.
But they're quite fragmented, yeah.
Well, one of their weaknesses is the fact that the Eastern European countries, and we have seen there is serious problems brewing in the East. The Eastern European countries are those which have been in living memory trapped in the Eastern Bloc. They were stuck in the Warsaw Pact, dominated by the Soviets, and they could not get out. Now, if it is demonstrated that Britain cannot get out of the EU, it will be a demonstration to everybody within the EU that they cannot get out.
Mm.
And that, of course, is where Mr. Guy Verhofstadt comes in with his empire. So, it basically means you can't get out. And the moment one would, for example, demonstrate to the British, if one were actually to achieve what the Joe Swinsons of the world want and whatever, that Britain would stay, the first thing that would happen to Great Britain would be that she would lose her rebate.
Yeah.
Because there would be absolutely no need to grant her financial rebate anymore. That would cost us billions over the years, because there would be no need to effectively placate the prisoner. Because it would have effectively been demonstrated that we're there against our will, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
because we can't leave.
The Lisbon Treaty says we lose it in 22. So...
I didn't know that.
From what I've read.
How much is that?
It's considerable. Well, it was. I think overall it works out to something in the region of 220 million a week or something.
Yes, it was the product of it was a product of Mrs. Thatcher handbagging the Europeans, because it was plain that because Britain had a much more urbanized society, we were actually getting a lot less out of agricultural subsidies than everybody else was.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, we were paying in more and getting out, we were paying in the same as them in proportion, but getting out much less because the agricultural subsidies make so much of the European budget. So effectively, she said, well, hang on a moment, why are we, just due to the way that we developed and that we industrialized before you lot did, why are we paying you all a lot more? And they just thought, oh, well, yes, this is something that is worth talking about, but perhaps not now, my dear. We'll talk about it at the next meeting and whatever. And this kept going on and on until eventually she said, okay, fine, if this is the way you want to play it. I've now been, pushed along several times. As of now, I am vetoing all business until you address this.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, they couldn't conduct any European business because the UK government vetoed everything. Until eventually they realized, okay, this old bag is serious. She's going to murder every single attempt at introducing anything unless we address this. And then finally, yes, they Kohl and Mitterrand had to concede, okay, yes, Britain has a perfectly valid point. You are getting out of it a lot less than the rest of us are due to the agricultural sector, and therefore you should get a rebate.
Right.
And because that rebate was in the hundreds of millions per year, if not billions, if you consider that that's been running since the 1980s when Margaret Thatcher's been in charge, that's now been worth billions and billions, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the first thing that the European Union would scrap if they had any, hold over us, which they would if it becomes clear that we can't leave, the first thing they would scrap would be that.
Oh, yeah. And like you said, it's due to end anyhow.
Well, I've not heard of that, I must say. This is the first I've heard of it.
I plan on... I don't know if I'll do a stream on it. I might get someone particularly, into these sorts of things, get AA along or something, and go through it. Because I believe it's quite a short document that basically lists everything off. I think it's only 6 pages. So I will look into that, and maybe it'll be a fun stream to work out exactly how we're being cucked and why. But the general sense of it. But yeah, so I will say I can't substantiate it right now. It's just something that I read, and if you've read it on the internet, of course it must be true. So I need to check that out. William Southworth says the UK has roughly 13% of the EU population as opposed to European population. So we are paying...
Well, the EU population is the interesting part.
Yeah. Which is obviously in keeping with the percentage that we give in budget to it. Right. Iggy says, my super sweet F-16. Yeah, referring back to the Saudi Arabia stuff. Right. And JS says, undoomed. Who will be the Democrat contender in 2020?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, right now it looks like Biden, right? I guess, but I'm not sure he can hold out. So then it's between Sanders and Warren, and I'm not sure they're going to go for an old guy. So maybe Warren.
You reckon Warren, even after the whole Native American thing?
Well, that's been over and done with for a long time now. They don't seem to care.
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, she's been polling right up there with Sanders, and obviously Biden is still in the lead, but that guy can't string a sentence together to save his own life.
He can't help smelling people's hair either, apparently. So
yeah, that too. But he can't. He must have Alzheimer's. He keeps forgetting what he's talking about, and he's just trailing off, and he's got no clue. It's kind of embarrassing when you see him talk.
Well, have you ever seen that clip where because I think somewhere in the 80s or whatever, he was already in a presidential out?
Sorry,
Because
he was what?
he was already in a presidential race. He was already a presidential candidate once, I
Right.
believe, somewhere in the 80s or whatever, and dropped out because he was found to have, let's say, plagiarized a speech by a British politician.
Oh, that rings a bell.
Yeah, it was Neil Kinnock. So basically, I think he had been to Britain, and then he went back to the US, and pretty much a week later, used pretty much exactly the same lines as Neil Kinnock had in a party political speech.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think blew up at the time and ended his bid back then.
Right.
And it's just remarkable that not a lot more has been made about what actually sunk him back then. Do you understand what I mean? I mean, you would have thought, well, hang on a moment, if that torpedoed him several decades ago, why is nobody talking about it now?
I don't know, man. They're just, it's the same thing with the Indian thing, like you said. They're, it's over and done with. They don't care
I mean,
anymore.
is it perhaps that you're basically talking about, the party faithful, that with them these things don't matter, but once it's no longer a question of the Democrats selecting it, but once it then goes to the public and it becomes more mainstream, you then don't get the I don't care about this as much as you might with impassioned sort of party partisans, if you know what I mean.
Sure, but they won't know that until they have had
true.
Yeah, so
I think the only thing I've seen from the Democrat primaries was a chat. I wish I remembered his name. Absolutely, like they were comparing his like he was in Texas, and he was talking to this woman who was trying to do a Q&A with him, and he was like, "I don't want to take your guns. This is the thing I want you to remember, that I want you to keep your right to the Second Amendment," and so on. And then he was at the Democrat primary and just screaming into the microphone about gun control and how he was going to take away all the guns.
You're talking about Beto O'Rourke?
Beto, yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
So that was quite amusing. But I don't know, people in chat are talking about Tulsi Gabbard.
I mean, she's the most reasonable one of them. It would be great if they selected her, but they won't.
Yeah. And what do you make of Trump's chances in general at the moment?
Well, I think they're pretty good. I mean, we can't trust the polls. Remember how that went last time? They have every single candidate will beat Trump according to the polls. So.
Of course.
I see Trump as winning. I cannot see any candidate that would beat Trump here in this field, and I just think that the incumbent has a very, very strong advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, you're looking at an incumbent who has got a strong economy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, all the other things aside, an incumbent who has got a strong economy, I think he's pretty much got the best sort of unemployment figures for 50 years, hasn't he?
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, when you're looking at something like that, then you can just basically stand back, look at that big picture and say, well, what would it take to unhorse such a guy? Whether it's Trump or anybody else.
I don't know. I mean, you're completely right, of course, and it's very hard to beat the president at being presidential. Obviously, when he comes in Air Force One, everyone already sees him as the president.
Yeah.
So it's easy to vote for the incumbent. But on the other hand, I've never seen this level of rage before in politics.
Well, yes, but his side is also incredibly switched on, isn't he? I mean, he's never stopped campaigning. He's been going from football stadium to football stadium full of screeching people in red baseball caps.
Yeah, sure.
So he has got an incredibly energized base. Yes, the other side equally hates him, but I just feel that, yes, he will. At the time when he came to power, he was pretty much the most unpopular president at the beginning of a presidency ever.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason he had won is because the Democrats had managed to find an even more unpopular candidate to stand against him.
Yeah.
But since then, I think a great many will have, not the hardline Democrats or whatever, but I think sort of, when it comes to the middle of the road folk, the folks that think about politics every 4 years, I think they will have basically looked at him and gone, he isn't really the great white Satan we were promised.
That's true, and but on the other hand, I have no idea how much that propaganda hits home.
Yeah,
and I guess nobody has any idea on that. But
so
I don't know. There are lots of things you can weigh the pros and cons of.
My perspective, wasn't it Bill Clinton who's? I think he's credited. It was actually one of his advisors, but it's usually credited to Bill Clinton, who said it's the economy, stupid. When he was running against George Bush Sr.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I would say yes, it's still the economy, stupid. So if you are the president who is basically sitting on an economy that's doing very well, you're employing more people than the country's ever done, I think you've got to, I think any opposition has got a problem trying to take it off you.
I wouldn't put it past them to put us into a recession before then, just to tank the election, though.
Well, yes, but I mean, even if the economy has a downturn, if you're sitting on the best employment figures for 50 years, you would still need to lose a hell of a lot of jobs in order to undo that effect, if you know what I mean.
Of course.
I
mean, he's got a good shot.
I mean, I'm not one of these people who is basically, crediting him with all this job creation and this growth. I think presidents tend to take a lot more credit for it than they're actually due, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But it nonetheless has that effect when it comes to elections. The president, or in any country, really, if you're running the government and your country is booming,
he didn't fuck it up. That's the important part.
And therefore I think he's very, very difficult to unseat, and that's why I think we're seeing such a weak field of Democrat candidates, because all the really serious players who fancy their chances will think, hang on a moment, I'll run in 4 years' time. I'm not running against this guy now with these economic figures.
No, it'll probably be easier to do it in 4 years for sure, if that's your.
I saw Trump doing a meme of Trump 2024 posters up on Twitter, and this is the mix.
Oh, is that the one? Is that the one that eventually ends in? No.
The one that eventually ends in what?
In the year 3000. There was a meme where that was 2024 poster, and then eventually the number just keeps going up and up and up and up.
Yeah,
until eventually it says something like Trump 3000 or something like that.
I don't know. I think I only saw the 2024 one. Bringing things back across to Britain, though, I wonder, in the wake of this, in the event of this, an extension being sought. I don't know. I'm so frustrated with it. I cannot describe. I thought it was finally done. I thought it was finally going to start things moving. I thought everything was going to not be fine. I thought it was still going to be an uphill battle. But I thought at least the first step will have been taken, which is that we come out of the European Union by the end of October. My relief was palpable, and now I am. And as soon as I heard that they were defying it and all the hurdles which have come since then, I have just become more and more exasperated, and it was almost like a depression coming down on me for a couple of days, where I was just like, I am so sick to death of this bloody topic. And I wonder what it will take in the British public's mind for them to get to a point where they would be willing to walk up to Parliament, depose the people in Parliament, and basically have effectively a people's coup, as it were, to put someone in charge. It might even be Boris, but it might just be something symbolic, like throwing every single Remainer MP out of Parliament and say, right, they're out the way now, do your job. And then have him walk to the EU and hand them a single slip of paper which just says, we're out. And that's it. And then you can start negotiating, and you're no longer paying them anything. All your MEPs come back. That's it. You are now negotiating with them as an entity in and of yourselves. And I'm at the point where, if that were to be proposed, like the idea of walking into Parliament and doing that with a heavy heart, I would probably be willing to do that at this point, because it's taken so much longer than it should have. It has been stymied at every single opportunity. Every single chance that we've had to make a real impact with this has been wasted by Theresa May's government. Every single attempt that Boris has made, to make things work, has not only been because of course he's trying to appease both sides at the same time, has not only been had bricks thrown at him, proverbial bricks, shall we say, from the Lib Dems and the Remainer side. He's also being shafted by his own defecting MPs, which I can see why them saying, well, we're going to have to deselect you because you're not in line with both party policy and the will of the British people. This is something that should have happened 2 years ago. If an MP had voted Remain, they should have resigned, and there should have been local elections in the constituencies, and you should have been, I reckon that the vast majority of the politicians which would have got in at that point would have had to have sold themselves on a Leave mandate anyway, so especially given the constituency breakdown of 2/3 Leave to 1/3 Remain. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a lot of MPs in Leave seats pushing Remain. And
people are saying, oh, do you mean start a civil war? And so, it's not something I want to do. I don't want to do it. It's just, I don't know how we can get out of this mess at this point in a way which avoids, direct action in a way which we don't see in this country.
Well, put it like this. When it comes to the talk of civil war and whatever, this tends to be people who get angry, there's a civil war, there's this. A civil war only emerges when people are actually willing to shoot each other.
Yeah. 3 days without food.
I really don't think that anyone in Britain is really coming to the point yet where they're prepared to shoot somebody over this.
No, I don't think so.
What I, however, do think is that, do you remember how Blair fell from grace?
I remember he tried to suspend Parliament so he could do something. They met across the road and it basically forced him to resign.
Well, it just basically, everything fell apart. So basically, it suddenly became clear. This was actually shortly after he'd won an election, wasn't it? It suddenly became clear that his name had become toxic. And it was just the public would not wear it, and he was actually the anvil that was going to drag the Labour Party to the bottom of the sea. And suddenly, this guy who had for years been able politically to walk on water as far as they were concerned, was dead in the water, and they got rid of him.
He melted like the witch he was.
Yes. And this is what I see happening with Brexit.
But you have another problem here. It's not just one guy.
Yes, but what I'm trying to get at is it's kind of the subject matter that is the critical mass that is actually the British electorate. And at the moment, because of the mess, because of that, there is a Brexit party with Nigel Farage, there is the Tories. We don't know if these two forces are going to cancel each other out, allowing Labour and the Lib Dems perhaps to create a minority government or something like that. So at the moment, there are all sorts of mathematical possibilities. But the moment that it starts crystallizing, as I think it will, that the anti-Brexit forces are going to be annihilated in the election.
Right. That was the funniest thing about this that I heard. Like, it's fucking undemocratic to not or to have Brexit or whatever the fuck they're saying, right? And then Boris goes, okay, fine, we'll give you an election then. How about that? No, we don't want an election. What are you talking about?
And the reason nobody wants an election at the moment is not because they know they'll lose, they can't call it.
The thing that
Nobody
made
has
me laugh,
any idea which way it will go.
The thing that made me laugh was people were reporting getting Labour leaflets through the door calling for a general election.
Yeah, the day
as
that they
Labour
did it.
was sitting in Parliament saying, "We don't want a general election."
Yeah.
Yes, you can't make it up. Yes. But my feeling is at the moment, they don't want an election because they don't know which way it will go. They can't call it. It's too chaotic.
Yeah, but Boris was willing to have it.
Yes. But because Boris is just willing to do anything by now that will break the deadlock.
Right.
But the moment I think that it becomes more clear as to, the population won't wear this, and I don't think this is wishful thinking on my part. I really do think that the electorate at large will think that what has happened here was wrong. And Boris Johnson is actually quite a popular politician. And I really think that the moment that becomes clear, the politics will fall into place before that actually even plays out with the electorate. So I don't think that the electorate needs to annihilate one party. I think the politics will suddenly change with a sudden shunt in the same way they did with Tony Blair, once it becomes plain that one can't go on like that because otherwise one will be punished by the electorate.
At this point, I think we're going to be in a deadlock until 2022 when they're forced to call a general election. Like, genuinely. I think
it's a 6-year period.
Yeah, I think they'll stack. I think he's going to ask for he's going to have to go and ask for an extension. I think they're going to offer him either an indefinite or a multiple-year extension. I think that that Boris is going to go round and round in circles with the Remainers until they are forced to make a decision, because they are deadlocked now, and nothing that he can say will appease the Remainers. Nothing the Remainers say will appease the Leavers. The mandate will still stand. If the Remainers could drag it out for 30 years so that they could have the once-in-a-generation referendum again, they would do it. And I think that there's no pleasing them. I do not see, as I say, a way in which it could be achieved without direct action, which I don't think the British public are going to be pushed to anyway. Failing some, insane move by the EU where suddenly our contribution to them triples or something, and also they start, imposing curfews at night to appease climate change activists or something. I don't see it, because it doesn't affect people at home. It only affects the people who are really interested in politics. Everyone else just kind of goes, how's Brexit doing this week? Oh, it's still there. That's frustrating. Goes back to work, doesn't think about it. The only people who are getting, people like me, people like you, people like AA and a load of the autists in chat, no doubt, who are going, this is actually infuriating and we are trying to follow everything and it's been so long and we're so frustrated. But I think everyone else is just sort of ticking along. The economy is doing fine. If the economy was in flames, like the Remainers predicted, there would be a much stronger case for the Remainers to go, look what you're doing, look what you're doing, look what you're doing. And if the economy was going through the roof and all these businesses were, you had, let's say, dozens of international businesses going, we really want to invest in your economy. We want to do this. We want to do that. At the moment we've got Wetherspoons, which is the only chain company I'm aware of that's actually, publicly making an effort to say, this is how it's going to be good for business. This is the tax cut that we want. This is the amount that it's going to hit you. Your pints will be cheaper. Your food will be cheaper here. And it's the same quality food that we've always done. It's just going to change the tariffs, which makes it easier for us. But you don't have tons of businesses saying that. So the Leavers don't have a thing saying, why are you wasting all this opportunity? It's all hypothetical at the moment. And I'm ranted enough anyway. So that's
one of the cautionary points I sort of put forward with the idea that this will go on for years is that, of course, right now nothing can be done in any which direction. What I mean is not just Brexit-wise, but regarding anything. Because Parliament now is completely deadlocked. The government has no majority whatsoever. It is not even anywhere near anymore. The various parties in Parliament, all they can agree on is that they don't want Brexit. They won't be able to agree on anything else.
Yeah.
As such, we may, if you're right and this goes on to 2022, it would basically mean that from now to 2022, Parliament will never decide anything.
Valorous in chat is saying, according to the Lisbon Treaty, we lose the army to Europe on November 1st, 2019.
What does that mean?
I have seen some stuff on this, but I won't claim to be a source of any authority on it. Basically, there was a thing talking about how you cede the ability to control your arm, or the European nations cede their ability to control their armed forces to the European Union, and for instance, the oath to the Queen that you do when you attest will be revoked for all serving members, and they will have to undertake a new oath to the European Union. I do not know if there's any truth to the statement.
I'm strongly skeptical of that.
Yeah.
That sounds perverse.
It is going around several groups, but I don't trust them enough to say it's an authoritative thing. But I think if something like that were to happen, I think that there would be a great surge of, get this thing done, we're not doing that. But I don't think... I don't know whether or not that is the specifics of it. That's just
that sounds
what
outrageous.
I've seen. It was brought up in the Lords, but by a Lord who is known for perhaps being a little bit conspiratorial. So I don't know whether or not there's much substance to it, or whether or not it was a proposal, or whether or not it's actually happening. So we'll see. Colin P. Smith says, can the oath be revoked except by the Crown? I don't know. I don't think they planned for the oath to be revoked. There's the point of the oath. So I don't know, unfortunately. But there we are.
Yeah, they don't plan for your membership to be revoked either. So.
Right. Well, on that note, I think it is time to end. But thank you very much to my guest.
So you think you've spread enough happiness for the evening?
Oh, you know how it is. I think there we are. I need to go away and read the Lisbon Treaty and do some other stuff.
Fun.
Well, perhaps I'll do it tomorrow morning. But yes, thank you ever so much to my guests for joining me this evening. Thank you very much, Discordia.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Undoomed.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you very much, Britisher, as always.
It has been an honour and a privilege as ever.
Well, I wish you all the very best of luck with your week ahead. I'm hoping to have a comedy video out by the end of the week, but we'll see how that goes. And I hope to all of you that Brexit goes through by the end of October. I will see you all next week. Hopefully, we can talk about something other than the failing state of our nation's democracy. And until then, take care, everyone, and good night.
Toodle pip.
Always got to get the last word in.